The last thing I registered was her silhouette framed by the brilliant sun just before the avalanche of rocks began. "These should keep you warm," she murmured, her voice strangely tender, as if she were tucking me into bed rather than entombing me. Then came the darkness, not merely an absence of light, but a thick, smothering blackness that seeped into my very marrow. The silence followed, immense and absolute, and with it came the cold. It was a profound chill that emanated not from the stone walls but from the dawning horror that Clara, my wife, had just left me here to perish. We had been married for 15 years. A decade and a half of shared morning coffees, long drives, and anniversaries that had gradually lost their meaning. We had been a team once, or at least that's what I had deluded myself into believing. I was the geologist, the man with earth under his fingernails and a mind full of mineralogy. Clara was the silver-tongued negotiator, the master of marketing pitches and charming investors, the one who always knew precisely what to say until, one day, she simply fell silent. I should have recognized the sign sooner. The subtle shift in her gaze, where I became an obstacle rather than a partner. The way our dinners would lapse into quiet when I spoke of my research, or how she never once inquired about the significance of my most recent find, not just for me but for the entire geological field. I had located veins of tantalum and niobium deep within the Sierra Nevada, strategic rare metals hidden for eons, worth a fortune. It never occurred to me that the money would be what mattered to her. I simply expected her to be proud. When I first unfurled the map, she beamed, suggesting we investigate it together, just the two of us, like in the old days. I remember feeling a surge of hope, thinking we might be rediscovering our connection. She packed our supplies while I gathered my charts. The ascent into the mountains was tranquil, winding through forests tinged with the first golds of autumn. I would point out geological features, and she would offer a polite nod. We arrived at the trailhead around midday. The location was isolated, a 200-meter climb on foot. I had noted the cave's mouth during a survey 5 years prior but hadn't had the resources to explore further. That day, I felt a familiar thrill, the pure joy of discovery, and perhaps a naive sense of trust. Clara carried 2 backpacks, mine was light, but hers was suspiciously heavy. It never crossed my mind to ask why. The hike lasted about an hour. I led, pausing periodically to verify my position against the topography, with Clara a few paces behind. Upon reaching the plateau, I gestured toward the dark opening in the rock face. "There," I said, breathless. "That's the entrance. The locals call it Widow's Hollow, but don't worry, it's just superstition." She offered no smile. Inside, the atmosphere was cool and carried the scent of metal, like old currency and moist soil. We switched on our headlamps. My heart hammered with anticipation as I moved deeper, my fingers tracing the cool stone. And then I saw it, a shimmering black line cutting through the rock. Tantalum, pure and untouched. My throat went dry. I was right, I breathed. This is it. I knelt, meticulously gathering samples and labeling each one. I heard Clara's boots crunch as she stepped back, then further back still. I didn't look up, too immersed in the discovery, until she spoke my name. "Nate," she said softly. "Come look at this." A strange quality in her voice gave me pause. I turned slowly, securing my sample case. "What is it?" She smiled, but it was a smile that sent a chill down my spine, not one that offered warmth. "Just come here." I moved toward her. Her headlamp's beam danced across the jagged walls behind her. She reached out, pulling me into a close embrace. "I love you," she whispered, her hands gripping my waist tightly. "You know that, don't you?" My breath hitched. "Clara, what are you doing?" She pulled back just enough to look into my eyes, which were now darker than I had ever seen them. "I'm sorry." Then she pushed. It was a swift, efficient movement. My back slammed against the cavern wall, and before I could even cry out, she had spun around and was sprinting for the entrance. I scrambled to my feet, yelling her name, stumbling over loose scree. That's when I heard it, the first sickening crack of shifting rock. Then another, followed by a deafening roar as the entrance collapsed in a cloud of granite and dust. I ran until my hand slammed against a solid, unyielding wall of stone. I hammered my fists against it, screaming until my voice was raw. "Clara, what the hell are you doing? Open this damn cave." First, there was only silence. Then, her voice came, muffled but calm, almost gentle. "You always loved your rocks more than me, Nathan. Now you can have them forever." She was gone. I pressed my forehead against the cold rock, my breathing shallow and erratic. This couldn't be happening. She couldn't have planned this. Not Clara. Not after everything we'd been through. But even as the denial churned within me, I recognized the cold truth. Every action had been premeditated. This was her plan from the moment we left Elkmorn. I sank to the ground, my flashlight beam flickering over the damp, glittering walls. Deeper in the tunnel, water dripped with a steady, cruel rhythm, marking time in my new tomb. 15 years of marriage, annihilated in a single, calculated act of betrayal. I was buried alive, and no one knew where I was. Or so I had thought. I'm not sure how long I remained there. Minutes bled into hours. Time loses its meaning when you are trapped deep within the earth. Every sound becomes magnified, every silence stretches into infinity. I forced myself to take steady breaths, to fight the rising panic, but my thoughts spiraled. I thought of my colleagues at the Institute, the grant committee awaiting my report, my brother who I hadn't spoken to in weeks, and Clara. It always came back to Clara. My hand shook as I steadied my flashlight. I had less than half a bottle of water and a few protein bars in my pack. This was meant to be a quick survey, not a fight for survival. The beam of light landed on something ahead. It wasn't rock or crystal. It was movement. I froze. About 20 feet away, a figure stepped into the light. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with a dense beard and sharp, watchful eyes that met mine with the intensity of forged steel. For a heartbeat, I was paralyzed, my heart thudding so loudly it seemed to shake the very stone around me. Who are you?" My voice was a shredded whisper. He didn't startle, simply raising his hands with his palms open. "Easy," he said, his voice a low calm. "I'm not going to hurt you." He moved fully into view, holding an old lantern and wearing a hunting knife on his belt. His clothes were functional and worn, a canvas jacket, faded denim, and mud-caked boots. He was not someone you would expect to encounter in a sealed cave. "The name's Elias," he said. "And I believe you, and I might share a common problem." I pressed myself against the wall, my flashlight still gripped like a club. "How did you get in here?" "There's another entrance," he explained. "And another exit. But getting there isn't simple." "You live in here?" I asked, my mind struggling to process this new reality. "More or less," he confirmed with a slight nod. "It's been 3 years since I came down from the mountains. This place, it's quiet. Safer, in its way." I studied him, searching for any sign of threat in his expression. His composure was unsettling. "You heard everything." He paused, then gave a single nod. "Most of it. Enough to know your wife isn't coming back for you." My fists clenched. "She tried to kill me." Elias's jaw tightened as he looked down. "People do terrible things out of desperation. But that was methodical." He moved closer and crouched by the rockfall. "She didn't just seal you in. She collapsed the only passage with breathable air. We need to get moving." My breath caught in my throat. "Move where?" "There's a network of chambers deeper inside. I've mapped most of them over the years. One leads to an underground river that flows out near the base of the mountain range. But the path is tight, flooded in parts, and perilous. We'll need all our gear, but it's the only chance we have." I blinked at him. "Why are you helping me?" His gaze met mine. "Because I know what it's like to be on the other side. The side where someone you trusted is just gone." There was a raw pain in his voice, a story I didn't yet know but instantly felt. For a long moment, I was silent, just looking at this man who had materialized from the shadows, offering not just an explanation, but a chance at survival. Finally, I nodded. We began our journey. The tunnel soon constricted, forcing us into a single file. The air was frigid and damp, smelling of minerals and an ancient, almost metallic earthiness. I kept my focus on the steady rhythm of Elias's boots ahead of me. After 10 minutes, we emerged into a wider chamber, faintly illuminated by his lantern. It was a makeshift living space. Shelves cobbled from driftwood held canned goods and tools. A rolled-up sleeping bag sat in a corner near a fire pit built beneath a natural ventilation shaft. "Welcome to my humble abode," he said with a wry tone. "It's not much, but it serves its purpose." I looked around, stunned. "You've been living here for 3 years after I lost my family," he said softly, tending to the fire pit. "There wasn't much left for me up there. I didn't press for more." I sat on a crude stool, wrapping my arms around myself as the full weight of my situation crashed down on me again. "I was supposed to be working," I said, my voice hollow. "She offered to come along. Said it would be romantic. Just the two of us, no distractions." Elias glanced over but let me speak. "I thought we were rebuilding something," I went on. "But she brought equipment to seal the cave. Ropes, tools, she planned it all because of the discovery." Elias asked. I nodded. "The site I located, it's worth billions. Rare earth metals. She saw a payday." I saw scientific progress. Elias coaxed a flame to life, the glow dancing across his face. "You saw purpose," he corrected gently. "She saw an escape." I looked at him. "And what did you see when you first found me?" His eyes held a quiet intensity. "A reason." I didn't know how to respond. The fire's warmth began to seep into my chilled fingers, but it couldn't touch the cold dread in my mind. We sat in silence, the only sounds the crackle of embers and the distant, echoing drip of water. He handed me a cup of tea he'd brewed from some wild herb. I accepted it with a trembling hand. "We'll set out before dawn," Elias announced. "We'll need every bit of daylight we can get." I stared into the cup. "Do you think we can make it out?" His voice was firm. "We have to, and for the first time since the rocks fell, I no longer felt utterly alone." We departed from his chamber before sunrise. Elias had methodically packed our supplies, canned food, water purification tablets, spare batteries, rope, and a waterproof tarp. I shouldered a small pack containing my geological samples, sealed and protected. It seemed absurd to worry about rocks after nearly dying, but they were more than that now. They were my evidence, proof that Clara hadn't just abandoned me, she had tried to steal my life's work, to kill me, to erase my existence entirely. We navigated the narrow passages with care. My body ached from the fall, and my muscles protested each step. The beam from my headlamp bounced off the walls, revealing mineral veins that shimmered like spectral trails in the darkness. "There's a crawl space ahead," Elias warned. "About 15 feet long. It gets narrow. Stay calm. If you start to feel trapped, just stop and call out." I swallowed. The fear of tight spaces, a new and unwelcome companion. He entered the gap first, moving with the practiced ease of someone who knew this route intimately. I followed, dropping to my stomach, the sound of my own ragged breathing loud in my ears. "Talk to me," I managed to whisper. "What do you want to know?" came his steady voice from just ahead. "Anything. Tell me why you came to this place." There was a moment of silence. "My wife's name was Leah," he began. "And our daughter, Sophie. She was 9. She was so bright, loved horses." The cold stone pressed against my chest, but his words gave me something to focus on. "We were hiking in the Cascades. A rock slide, it came out of nowhere. I had rescue training, I knew the terrain, but I was just 20 feet too far away." I winced in the darkness. "They were buried before I could reach them," he continued, his voice heavy. "I dug with my bare hands for hours, broke them open. I found her necklace first, then one of her little boots." My stomach twisted, but I remained silent. "I quit my job after that. I left everything behind. I came here because I thought if I could find a place where the silence was absolute, maybe the guilt would finally quiet down." We emerged into another cavern. I gasped, both from relief and from the breathtaking sight before us. The walls were adorned with long, fragile stalactites, their tips glistening with moisture, while the floor was a tapestry of rippling mineral pools. Elias turned to me. "You okay?" I nodded. "Yeah. Thanks for talking." "I needed that. Talking helps keep the panic at bay," he said simply. We pressed on. The further we traveled, the more the air changed, growing cooler and more humid. I felt the deep, constant rumble before I heard it. "The river," Elias said. The chamber suddenly opened onto a jagged precipice overlooking a subterranean river, its waters black and swift. The roar of the current filled the space, echoing off every surface. Elias pointed to the far wall. "There's a ridge trail that runs alongside the river. We'll follow that for a few hours, then we have to make a narrow crossing." I glanced down at the churning water, which looked as thick and wild as crude oil. "Has anyone ever made it out this way?" "Just me," he said. "And soon, hopefully, you." We began our careful descent, each footstep placed with deliberate caution. The ledge was precarious, at times barely wider than my boot. Elias often had to turn and offer a steadying hand as we navigated past wet, slick rock faces. I hated needing his help. I was used to being the leader, on expeditions, in the lab, in boardrooms. Now, my survival depended on the assured grip of a stranger. When we found a wider section of the ledge, Elias gave me a protein bar and his canteen. As we rested, I asked, "Do you think she's told anyone what happened yet?" "Clara." He was quiet for a moment. "She's probably already set her story in motion. Told everyone it was a tragic accident. That she tried to save you." I stared out at the dark water. "You think they'll believe her?" "They'll believe what is most convenient," Elias replied. "Unless you're there to give them a reason not to." My jaw tightened. "I will be." He watched me for a moment. "You still have the samples?" I patted the waterproof pack. "Good," he said. "You're going to need them." The thought of confronting Clara made my skin crawl, seeing that smug, calculating expression, knowing she was out there, spinning her lies while I was left for dead. But there was no retreat. I had survived, and that had to count for something. Elias stood, extending a hand. "We still have a long way to go." The path grew narrow once more, the river thundering beside us. At one point, the ledge vanished completely, and we had to wade thigh-deep in the glacial current, hugging the cave wall. "Stay close to the rock," Elias yelled over the roar. "Use the handholds." Move sideways. We shuffled inch by agonizing inch, the cold seeping through my clothes. My legs burned with the effort, and my fingers grew numb as they clung to the stone. By the time we hauled ourselves back onto a dry patch of rock, I was shaking uncontrollably. Elias gave me a dry towel from his pack and activated a small chemical heater, tucking it under a mylar blanket he wrapped around me. "We'll rest here for 10 minutes, he said. I huddled in silence, teeth chattering, mind racing. "Thank you," I said softly. He didn't answer immediately, just sat near me, offering warmth without crowding my space. "You're stronger than you think," he said at last. I turned to look at him. "So are you?" A faint smile touched his lips, the first I'd seen that reached his eyes. Somewhere far ahead lay the end of this tunnel, perhaps daylight, wind, the sound of birds. But for now, there was only this, two strangers in the dark, moving toward a future neither of us could yet imagine. By the time we reached the crossing, any sense of the sky above had vanished. There was only the river, the rock, and the sound of our breathing. Elias stopped where the water squeezed between the walls, creating a passage just wide enough to submerge and swim through. "We have to go under," he said calmly. I stared at the current, black and roiling like a living beast. "How far?" 5, maybe 6 meters. "It's a tight squeeze, but I've done it before." "I'll go first to make sure the way is clear." I hesitated. "And if it's not?" His eyes met mine, unwavering. "It is. I know the signs, the airflow, the way the sound carries. There's oxygen and light on the other side. I can feel it." I wasn't sure if I believed in the signs, but I believed him. He sealed our packs in waterproof bags, tied them securely, then put a hand on my shoulder. Keep your arms in tight. Don't fight the current, let it pull you until you feel the incline. Then swim up. I'll be there, and with a practiced dive, he disappeared into the roaring darkness. I was alone. A minute passed, then 2. I counted each frantic beat of my heart. The walls seemed to close in. I clenched my fists to stop their shaking. Still no sign of him. What if he'd been wrong? What if he'd miscalculated? A splash cut through the noise. Elias surfaced on the other side, drenched but grinning. He raised a hand. It's clear. Your turn. I took 2 deep breaths and leaped. The cold was a physical blow, stealing my breath. The world dissolved into a chaos of bubbles and brute force. The current seized me, twisting and shoving me forward. I fought the instinct to panic, keeping my body streamlined, my head down. Seconds stretched into an eternity. Then I felt my body being carried upward. I kicked with desperate strength, my lungs screaming for air. And then, I broke the surface. Elias's arms were there, pulling me from the water onto solid ground. I lay there, gasping and coughing, shaking violently, but alive. You did it, he said, wrapping a dry blanket around me. I let out a laugh that sounded more like a sob. I honestly thought I was going to die, and not today, he said, and the simple certainty in his voice steadied me. We recovered in a dry alcove, sharing the last of our food. The air here was different, less stagnant, hinting at an opening to the world above. I thought I could hear the distant call of birds. I looked at Elias. What do you think Clara is doing right now? He considered this. Crafting the perfect lie. I nodded slowly. She was always good with words. Knew how to spin any situation to her advantage. She's probably told them you slipped, Elias surmised. That she did everything in her power to save you. I'd bet she's already back in Elkmorn, giving interviews, playing the part of the grieving widow. Then it's time we gave them the real story, I said. We began our final ascent, climbing through damp shafts that smelled of pine and wet earth. With every upward step, I rehearsed the moment I would walk back into town, the moment I would see her face, not as a ghost of her memory, but as her reckoning. A few hours later, we reached the end. A curtain of thick vines obscured the entrance, filtering the sunlight into golden shafts. Elias pushed them aside, letting me be the first to step out into the open. The sun on my skin felt like a benediction. I squinted, my eyes slowly adjusting to the light. The forest around us was vibrant with the rustle of leaves and the scent of pine. I turned in a slow circle, breathing in the clean, cold mountain air. Tears streamed down my face before I was even aware of them. Elias emerged, blinking in the bright sun. Welcome back, he said softly. We started down the slope. From our vantage point, we could see the thin ribbon of the highway and the town of Elkmorn nestled in the valley below. Smoke curled from distant chimneys. It all looked so small, so ordinary. 3 hours later, covered in dust and aching in every muscle, we walked into the outskirts of town. I felt like an apparition in a world that had moved on without me. People stared at us, 2 men who looked as if they had clawed their way out of the earth itself. We found a local diner, drawn by the grounding scent of frying bacon and coffee. But I froze just inside the door, my eyes fixed on a television mounted on the far wall. There she was. Clara. Standing in front of our cabin, dressed in black, her expression somber as she spoke to a reporter. It was a terrible accident, she said, her voice catching. We were exploring a new section when the cave-in occurred. I tried to save him. I did everything I could. I stood there, heart hammering against my ribs. The waitress approached me. Sir, are you okay? Elias stepped forward. Is there a sheriff in town? She pointed. Station's 2 blocks down, at the end of Main. We didn't hesitate. By the time we reached the station, I was trembling with adrenaline. The officer at the desk looked up, his expression shifting from boredom to confusion. I'm Nathan Vega, I said, my voice steady. And I need to report an attempted murder. That one sentence changed everything. We were led into a side room. A detective was called. I laid out the samples, and Elias recounted the timeline, repeating the exact words Clara had said before sealing my tomb. The sheriff, a heavy-set man with weary eyes, looked from me to Elias. "This is beyond our jurisdiction now. We'll have to contact the counties," I nodded. "Do it quickly. She's making a move on the discovery. She's probably already filed for a death certificate." As if on cue, the sheriff typed something into his computer, then let out a curse. "She did. 2 days ago. Already petitioned to assume spousal inheritance of all intellectual property." I closed my eyes for a moment. "Then I need to prove I'm alive, and that the discovery was mine, not hers." "You have more than enough to do that," Elias said from beside me. I opened my eyes and looked at him. And for the first time in 4 days, I truly believed he was right. The next morning, I woke in a motel room that smelled of cedar and bleach. After 3 nights in a cave, it felt like a palace. Elias, in the adjacent room, knocked on my door just after dawn. "They've arranged it," he said. "Where?" "Back at the site. County detectives will be there. Her investors, too. She thinks she's about to close the deal." I nodded grimly. "Then let's go ruin her ending." The 2-hour drive back into the mountains was silent. I rode in an unmarked cruiser, watching the same winding roads and trees that had nearly become my grave markers. Clara had no idea what was coming. From behind a screen of trees, I saw her SUV parked near the collapsed cave. Another luxury vehicle, presumably the investors, was nearby. I could hear her voice before I saw her, that same charming, persuasive tone, her hands gesturing with practiced enthusiasm. She was so damn good at it. Detective Morgan, sitting beside me, murmured, "We'll let her talk. Once she incriminates herself, we move in. When I give the signal, you walk out." I gave a single, sharp nod. I wasn't shaking anymore. A hidden microphone fed us every word. "It was difficult," Clara was saying, her voice laced with false grief. "He was brilliant, so passionate, but the collapse was instantaneous. I barely got out myself. I did everything I could to dig him out, but the area was too unstable." She paused for dramatic effect. "He died doing what he loved. I just want to honor his legacy now." An investor's voice, smooth and corporate, replied, "We are deeply sorry for your loss. The preliminary reports on the mineral yields are extremely promising. Once the inheritance is finalized, we're very close," Clara replied smoothly. Just waiting on the last of the paperwork. The detective leaned forward and spoke quietly into his radio. "It's time," he said to me. I pushed open the car door, and the crunch of my boots on the gravel silenced the birds, and then the people. Clara turned, her sentence cut short. Her face drained of all color, becoming a waxy, ghostly white. Her eyes widened, her mouth hung open. "Hello, Clara," I said, my voice even. She took a stumbling step back. "Nathan, surprised to see me." I walked toward her, acutely aware of the sudden, dead silence. The plainclothes officers began to spread out behind me. "I imagine you'd already started making arrangements for my funeral. I saw the TV spot. Very convincing." I don't understand," she stammered. "There was a cave-in, you caused it," I cut in sharply. "You brought the tools. You blocked the only way out and told me, and I quote, 'These rocks should keep you warm forever.'" She blanched. "We have a witness," Detective Morgan announced, stepping forward. "We have physical evidence. We have recordings. Clara Vega, you are under arrest for the attempted murder of your husband, Nathan Vega," one of the investors swore under his breath. Clara didn't fight. She just stood there as they cuffed her, staring at me as if I were a nightmare made flesh. Perhaps I was. As they led her past me, she made one last, desperate attempt. "Nathan, it wasn't supposed to be like this. Don't," I said softly. "You buried me alive, thinking no one would ever uncover the truth. But the truth was there all along. You just didn't realize it had a voice." The officers took her away. I stood motionless. I had expected to feel triumphant, but all I felt was a profound exhaustion. As the site was secured and the first news vans began to arrive, I found Elias by the tree line, leaning against a pine, watching me. "You all right?" he asked. I nodded. "It's over, not entirely," he said gently. "But the worst part is I look back at the collapsed entrance, the place where she had tried to erase me. Now it was just a pile of rocks. Just geology. She hadn't won. She hadn't even understood the true value of what she'd tried to steal. Do you ever think," I asked Elias, "that some places protect us, even when people won't?" He tilted his head thoughtfully. "I don't think it's the place. I think it's the people who find you in it." I looked at him, and for the first time since being trapped in that cave, I let myself truly feel everything that had happened. I had survived. I had been saved. And maybe, for the first time in a long time, I had been truly seen. The air was crisp, touched with frost and the promise of a new day. I stood at the edge of Widow's Hollow, watching the early sunlight spill into the canyon. The stones that had been my prison now seemed inert and harmless. Behind me, Elias was packing our gear, his movements efficient and calm. The forest was stirring to life around us. I took a deep breath, the scent of pine filling my lungs. This place, once my tomb, had become a passage to survival. Now, it felt like a boundary between the man I had been and the man I could become. I turned to Elias. His eyes were clear, steady. "Thank you," I said, the words feeling inadequate. "For everything." He shrugged, almost bashfully. "You did all the hard work." "No," I insisted. "You showed up when no one knew I existed. You guided me when I was sure I would never see daylight again. You trusted me." He held my gaze. "I did. Because I believed you deserved to live." My heart gave a solid thump. To live, not just to breathe. I remembered the plunge into that icy river, the certainty that the darkness would claim me. But some instinct had fought back, and he had honored that fight. "We should get back," I said. "I have a life to reclaim." He nodded. "Whatever you need." We walked down the trail side by side, each step feeling lighter than the one before. At the trailhead, my rental SUV sat waiting, coated in dust. I loaded our packs and turned to him. "Will you come with me?" I asked. "To Elkmorn?" "To the Institute." He paused, his gaze drifting toward the winding road below. "I never thought I'd leave these mountains." I swallowed. "I know. But maybe it's time." He looked back at me, a slow smile spreading across his face. "For you, I'd try." Relief and gratitude washed over me. I touched his arm, surprised by the simple warmth of human contact after so many days in the cold dark. "Thank you," I whispered again. We drove in a comfortable silence. When we reached town, the streets were placid, the locals going about their morning routines, oblivious to the drama that had played out just up the mountain. I pulled into the lot beside the Geology Institute. The building was the same, but I felt irrevocably changed. Inside, Director Ramirez greeted me as if I were a ghost returned. He pumped my hand, congratulating me on the evidence I'd brought back. In a back office, I signed the documents that officially restored my name to my own discovery. The weight of false death certificates and fraudulent inheritance claims dissolved under the formal seal of justice. Later, Elias and I walked the Institute's halls, which were lined with geological maps and mineral displays. I showed him the lab where I'd first analyzed the tantalum, the conference room where I would now present my own findings. He listened with genuine interest. "This is your world," he said. "I'm honored to have a glimpse of it." I laughed, the sound light and free. "And you? Where do you belong now?" He thought for a moment. Somewhere between the silence of the caves and the heartbeat of humanity. Maybe here with you." My breath caught. This wasn't born of pity or convenience. It was a bond forged in fear and betrayal, a choice to step forward into an unknown future because we had faced the darkness together and emerged stronger. In the following weeks, I returned to my work, but this time with a full team, legal protections, and a plan for sustainable mining. Elias remained, offering his expertise in safety assessments and teaching survival skills to new recruits. In recognition of my ordeal and discovery, the Institute officially renamed the site Vega Ridge. One evening, long after the labs had emptied, Elias appeared at my office door with 2 steaming mugs. Outside, the sky was filled with stars. "I've been thinking," he said, handing me a mug. "About what's next." I sipped the tea, its warmth spreading through me. He met my eyes. "I want to stay. To build something with you. I don't know anything about academia, but I know about loyalty. I know about courage. And I know about finding light in the darkest of places." A soft breeze drifted across the balcony, lifting a strand of my hair. I felt my heart crack open, as if the mountain itself had finally set me free. "I'd like that," I said, and the words were utterly true. He smiled, a look of profound relief on his face. "Then let's start here." We touched our mugs together, the quiet clink echoing into the night. I thought of Widow's Hollow, once meant to be my grave, now a symbol of my resilience. And I thought of the man who had rescued me, who had chosen to believe in me when no one else could. The world was vast and uncertain, but for the first time in a very long time, I wasn't afraid. I had my discovery, my voice, and my life back. And beside me was a man whose unwavering friendship had saved it. This, I knew, was only the beginning.